Hi, good morning or good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for attending. We're gonna start in about 4 minutes. We're just gonna wait for a few more folks to log on. So if you want to take a minute and top up your coffee or grab some water, now would be the perfect time, and we will start right at 5 after 12. Okay, everybody, we are 12:05 now, so I hope everyone was able to grab a coffee or water or whatever you need. Again, thanks everybody for joining. Just a couple quick housekeeping issues. We've put your mic and your cameras are turned off, so don't worry about that. Anyone who's attending will get a copy of, or will get a link to the presentation. We're recording it, so you can go back and look at it later. We're going to save some time for questions at the end. So if you want to wait till the end to ask the question, great. If you think of something that you really want to know the answer to, please use the chat function, and we'll be monitoring that chat function, and we'll go through We'll go through the questions at the end. So we're hoping to leave about 10 minutes at the end of the presentation for those questions. So yeah, let's get started. Next slide. So I'm Adam Crawford. I'm the National Practice Leader for the Indoor Environmental Quality Service line here at Pinchin, and I'm also the Legionella Practice Specialist. I'm going to start off by talking about kind of exposure pathways, some history and risk factors. Pierre from our Mechanical Engineering Division is then going to take over and talk about really some cooling towers and management programs. And then Rafik is going to close it off talking about analytical methods, pros and cons, timing around sampling and delivery and things like that. And we can go one more slide, please. So the origin of Legionnaire's disease. So first documented in 1976 in Philadelphia at the Bellevue Hotel during an American Legion convention. So during that convention, there were 221 cases of really an unusual respiratory disease, headaches, high fever, and difficulty breathing. So of those 221 cases, 35% of those cases were hospitalized, and it resulted in 34 deaths. So, thinking about kind of history of diseases and things like that, 1976 isn't that long ago. So it's a relatively new disease. The Center for Disease Control did identify the bacteria Legionella pneumophila and did isolate it from the hotel cooling tower, but you got to remember that this is the first time it was isolated. So, it's not like they walked into the building and immediately identified it. It doesn't grow, like the bacteria doesn't grow really well on traditional media. So the investigation did take some time. They had to kind of modify the media. It can be outcompeted by other bacteria very easily during that culturing method. And when they did isolate it, they did find it in the hotel cooling tower. Next. So Legionnaire's disease is a bacterial pneumonia that is caused by the inhalation of aerosols containing the Legionella bacteria. The disease develops in anywhere between 2 to 10 days of exposure, flu-like symptoms, chest pains, high fever. It can progress to pneumonia, and it can be fatal. Fatality rates around 10 to 15%. The good news is it can be treated effectively if it's caught early. Now, you have to inhale that aerosol with the Legionella bacteria. There are also examples of folks kind of being exposed, like aspiration, if they're like chewing or sucking on contaminated ice or water and things like that. But it's usually inhalation of an aerosol, or it has to be inhalation of the aerosol containing that bacteria. So it's not contagious, so it's not transmitted from person to person. It is really just through that aerosol inhalation. So when we talk about the Legionella bacteria, Legionnaire's disease is that very, very crucial and severe form of the disease. The Legionella bacteria can also cause another condition known as Pontiac fever, which is really flu-like symptoms that may or may not be diagnosed. If you get the flu, you don't automatically go to the doctor, and if you go to the doctor with flu-like symptoms, they're not necessarily going to test you to see if you've been exposed to Legionella bacteria. So in terms of cases in Canada, the average number of cases is around 438 between the years of 2015 and 2019. But because of that's Legionnaire's disease specifically. So because the bacteria can cause Pontiac fever as well, which combined is known as Legionellosis, the actual infections could be 2 to 3 times or higher because of that underdiagnosis. Because if you have Pontiac fever, you might not go to the doctor. You might get better on your own, and then you're never diagnosed with it. But Legionnaire's disease is a reportable disease. So if it's diagnosed, it will be reported to public health. In the US, their estimates annually between 2017 and 2021 are around 8,200 cases, and possibly 5 to 10 times higher because of that underreporting or underdiagnosis. Next one, please. So the risk factor. So, perfectly healthy individuals can become ill after exposure to the Legionella bacteria. Higher risk factors are, high consumption of alcohol. Smokers are those with an underlying respiratory issue. And then, the elderly, the immunocompromised, they are at a much higher risk of developing Legionnaire's disease. Next, please. So again, that route of exposure is inhalation of contaminated water. And the size fraction we're really focused on here is between 1 and 5 micrometers. That's that size fraction that can be inhaled very deeply into the lung. And to put it in perspective, you've got a grain of sand's about 90 micrometers, a human hair, the diameter is about 50 to 70 micrometers. So we're talking about a really small aerosol size here. Not huge drops of water, just that very small mist that will be inhaled deeply into the lung. Next, please. So the Legionella bacteria, it's a naturally occurring bacteria. It can be found in all surface waters, lakes, streams, things like that. There are about 60 species that have been identified, and of those, about 26 have been reported to cause infection in humans. So Legionella pneumophila is the one species of the family which is the causative species for more than 90% of reported cases. So of the Legionella pneumophila species, that they have different strains or serogroups. So serogroup 1 is the one that's most frequently associated with Legionnaire's disease, followed by serogroups 4 and 6, which are the second and third types linked to Legionnaire's disease. Next, please. So again, that train of transmission, and because of our need to be, we want to be nice and cool during the hot summer months, and we want to have hot water for washing our hands, washing dishes, taking showers, and things like that. So it's really kind of a man-made risk. So water is brought in. Water, if you're municipally supplied, absolutely is treated, but you can get very, very small amounts brought into the building. Brought into a reservoir. So if that reservoir isn't maintained at the right temperature, or there's some stagnation, you're providing those conditions for that bacteria to multiply. Bacteria, given the right conditions, they love to multiply. If an aerosol is then generated, and I think on Legionnaire's disease, most people say it's cooling tower. Well, if you think about the systems inside your buildings, you've got showers, you've got faucet aerators, you might have humidification systems or misters, spas, water features, things like that. Those all can generate an amount of aerosol. That aerosol can then be inhaled if it's in that right size fraction, and then if a person is exposed, they can become ill. Next, please. In terms of water temperature, so the growth range for the bacteria is between 20 and 49 degrees Celsius. As temperatures increase above 49, growth really slows down, and then there's kind of rapid death around that 60 degrees Celsius and above mark. The ideal growth range for the bacteria, though, is right in that 30 to 42 degrees Celsius range. So if you think about systems where you might have a mixing valve at the tap, the water's probably coming out, 40, mid 40s to 49, something like that. So you probably have a lot of systems that could be operating in that ideal growth range temperature, or systems that the water's not flowing, that could be heating up or cooling down into that ideal growth range. Next, please. Biofilm, and Pierre's going to touch on biofilm a little bit when he's talking about cooling towers. So it's really one of the primary contributors to outbreaks. So that biofilm, sludge, whatever you want to call it, it can build up in your domestic water pipes. It can build up in fountains. It can build up in cooling towers. And what it does is it serves to protect the bacteria, particularly from that chemical disinfection. So it protects the bacteria from that chemical disinfection. If it's disturbed, it can release high quantities of the Legionella bacteria. And we see it as particularly an issue on older pipes, corroded systems, domestic hot and cold water pipes, and things like that. Next, please. Another issue in buildings are dead legs. So you can have two types of dead legs, really. You can have a dead leg where, during a renovation activity, you removed a sink, for example, and that supply branch wasn't kind of taken back to the main riser. It was just kind of capped in place. So you can have a dead leg there, and you can have a dead leg where, you've got a sink, but no one uses it. So these dead legs are risk factors. If the water doesn't move in about a week, it's going to be considered a dead leg. So when that water's not moving, it's got that opportunity to kind of heat up or cool down, and can be function, or can have the water in that ideal growth range and allow for that bacteria to multiply. If you ever have like a loss in water pressure or something like that, that's the problem, where that dead leg could then drain back into the main riser and be distributed throughout the building. Next, please. And if you want to look into recent outbreaks, all you really need to do is check the news. So these are all stories from 2026, everything from hot tubs on cruise ships to casinos to a couple of clusters right now in and around the Greater Toronto area. So there's one in Toronto, and there's one in the Hamilton region, and these are from a couple of weeks ago, but I think they've isolated it to kind of that Stony Creek area. So like I can't say it's a sign of things to come, but like particularly for the GTA, like these two clusters, like it's pretty early in the season. Like we're just really getting up to those hot summer temperatures whenever all the cooling towers are really running at full capacity. So yeah, all you need to do is check the news. Next, please. So in terms of Canadian guidance here, you've really got, not every province has a regulation, of course. Provincial and federal occupational health and safety guidelines do have a general duty clause, which really you're supposed to take every precaution reasonable in the circumstances to protect the health and safety of the worker. We've got the MD 15161, which is really applicable to Crown-owned buildings, so they need to have a management program that complies with the MD 15161, and it's a pretty good standard. We refer to it very often. City of Vancouver has a bylaw which requires registration and I think an operating permit and some sampling. City of Hamilton has a cooling tower registry, but it doesn't really specify sampling requirements. And then you get into like the Safety Code of Quebec and the New Brunswick regulations, and those were really developed because of outbreaks that resulted in a number of deaths. So Safety Code of Quebec has really stringent sampling requirements and reporting requirements if you're exceeding that threshold. And New Brunswick as well has that kind of, you have to register your cooling tower, you have to have a plan in place, and then you have to be sampling on a certain frequency to comply with that regulation. Next one. So, I mean, you should have a water management plan for your building to protect your staff, your visitors, your trades, whoever's coming into the building from the risk of being exposed to Legionella bacteria. Some of the, there's a lot of resources available. The ones we use fairly frequently are the MD 15161 document. ASHRAE has standard 188 and guideline 12, which MD 15161 kind of references kind of the most current versions of these documents to be used in their in the development of those programs. The American Industrial Hygiene Association has some good guidance document as well. The Cooling Technology Institute has some literature available. There's lots more options available online. These are just a few of the resources that we would use in the development of a Legionella management program for your facilities. And I think with that, we're going to turn it over to Pierre.
Thank you, Adam. Good day, everyone. We're going to talk about cooling towers. So, as Adam mentioned in his early slides, like the first outbreak, was due to cooling tower. So we'll talk about the maintenance and why they contribute. Cooling towers are very important issues. So cooling towers require ongoing maintenance. That cooling towers can create conditions where bacteria may grow if not properly maintained. I hope everybody know what's a cooling tower. It's like act as a basin, take water from the building like hot water, trying to cool it down to bring it back to the building. And during that process where you have a fan that evaporates and mist like can be flown with the wind direction, like to places, where they have open window or like a population. So why cooling tower are considered high risk? Warm water environment, constant water circulation, exposure to outdoor air, fine water mist can carry bacteria into the air. So if problems develop, exposure may affect building occupants, maintenance staff, and nearby public area as well. Next, please, Michael. Next slide.
Sorry, it's not switching. There it goes.
Oh, that's all right. So why cooling tower are considered high risk? So you need like careful management. Like if you don't maintain them, they're really, as we spoke earlier, they're gonna be like really high risk, to occupants. Cooling tower can support bacterial growth because of optimal Legionella growth range, 30 degree to 42 degrees Celsius, as like mentioned earlier. And cooling towers operate within this temperature range, continuously circulate water, and produce airborne water droplets like mist. Like you don't see it, but you feel it. All right. If bacteria are present and not controlled, contaminated mist may spread beyond the buildings. Outbreaks have been linked to poorly maintained systems worldwide. Next, please. Consequences of poor maintenance. What can happen without proper maintenance? Poor cooling tower maintenance may result in health and safety concerns, complaints from occupants, regulatory investigations, emergency shutdown or remediation, increased operating and repair costs, and potential liability for owners and property managers. Preventative maintenance is significantly less costly than emergency response work. So if you maintain your cooling tower on a regular basis, you can save a lot. Thanks. Next one. So how do you maintain cooling towers? Mechanical maintenance is critical. So routine physical maintenance helps reduce conditions where bacteria can grow. Typical maintenance includes inspection, the basin, which is like the reservoir, fill media, fans, and drift eliminators. Removing dirt, sediment, scale, and debris. Checking water flow and tower operation. Seasonal startup and shutdown cleaning, and addressing damaged or deteriorated components. Good housekeeping is the foundation of an effective program. Thanks. Next. So why chemical treatment matters? Mechanical cleaning alone is usually not enough. Water treatment programs help control bacteria and algae growth, reduce slime and biofilm buildup, minimize scale and corrosion, improve overall system cleanliness and efficiency. So typical treatment programs may include biocides to control biological growth, corrosions inhibitors, which is critical in cooling towers, and scale control chemicals. Next, please. So monitoring and water testing is also important, like part of the maintenance. A good maintenance program includes regular monitoring and documentation. Typical monitoring includes water chemistry testing, checking biocide levels, monitoring pH and conductivity level, reviewing system condition and cleanliness, maintaining service logs and reports. If results fall outside acceptable range, corrective action should be taken promptly. Next, please. So what a good program looks like, hopefully all you as operators of a building, a strong program typically includes regular inspections and cleaning, continuous water treatment, routine testing and monitoring, qualified service providers, defined response actions if issues arise, annual review of procedure and system conditions. Consistency is a key to long-term risk reduction. Next, please. So what's your responsibility as building owners, building managers, operators? So property owners and management are expected to ensure a documented water management program using always qualified contractors. Don't rely on your super, or if you have building operator to look after it. You have to engage qualified contractors. Keep maintenance controls, records, and implement a water management plan. This is very important. So to keep you up to date with what's going on. Documentation is an important part of demonstrating due diligence into your building. Next, please. So key takeaway, so effective preventative require a proactive approach. Legionella risk can be managed with a proactive maintenance approach. Successful cooling tower programs rely on regular maintenance, continuous chemical treatment, ongoing monitoring and testing, and good documentation and record keeping. A proactive approach helps protect occupant health, reduce operational risk, limit liability exposure, and support regularity compliance. So repeat again, preventative maintenance is always more effective than reacting to a problem after it occurs. It saves a lot. Financially, health-wise, liability. I believe that's the last one, Michael, or do you have? Next one, please. Yep, thank you. Dr. Rafiq.
I'm not sure if we're having an issue with Rafiq. Rafiq, are you, can you jump on now? Oh,
okay.
There he is.
There you go. I am here. Okay. Everybody hear me? Okay. In this section, we are going to review sampling for Legionella, analytical methods used, and how we report Legionella after the analysis. Sampling has been covered a bit by Adam earlier on, but normally you do it because it's in your management plan, or you are following regulations, guidelines, or you want to verify whether your water treaters are doing a good job at keeping Legionella at bay. Or following an outbreak, you want to trace the Legionella there. And then after that, if you have to decontaminate the tower, then you want to have to do a sample and find out whether it is been effective. So how often do you take samples? For cooling towers, it's normally done after startup, making sure that everything is okay to run the cooling tower. And then thereafter, take a monthly sample. And if you do happen to have a high count, then you will have to decontaminate, and following that, take a sample and make sure that things are under control. And whenever you have high count, some levels of Legionella, but it's not going away, and you are still running the cooling tower, you do that on what we call as an emergency mode. So there, you will have to take a sample weekly to make sure that levels do not go beyond control. Okay. And for portable water samples, showers, faucets, and taps, and every 6 months is recommended. Decorative fountains every 2 months. And if whenever it is running, you have to take it every 2 months, and humidifiers every 3 months. What are the other considerations you take when you're sampling? First of all, you have to use a sterile bottle with a preservative, and these bottles are normally supplied by labs free of charge. What's the sample volume which we need to take? 100 ml is sufficient for labs to run a sample down to a detection limit of 1 colony forming unit per milliliter. It is in industrial, in pharmaceutical situations, the regulations are much more stringent. There you have to go to lower detection limit. So the volume varies from 500 to 1 liter of water. When do you sample? Cooling towers normally do that 24 to 48 hours after adding biocide to the system, or if you have a system running on continuous mode of biocide application, then you can take it at any time. For sampling taps and faucets and showers, take a pre-flush sample immediately after opening the shower, and then wait 2 minutes to take a post-flush sample. And for fountains and spas, it's usually done after before the application of the biocide. Sorry about that. When to use a swab? If you are trying to target biofilm, then it's ideal to use a sterile swab. It is meant for the walls of cooling towers, fountains. Again, you swabbing the walls of the fountains, or inside the shower head, you want to go inside and swab there, or inside faucets to swab around the aerators. This is a good way to do so. Okay. Now you've taken your samples, you have to submit it to a lab. The best way is to drive there and drop it to the lab itself. Our labs are not all around the place, so you need to send it by courier most of the time. Send it by courier for next morning delivery. Always send these in the best conditions, avoiding extreme heat and extreme cold. So use a good cooler box with an ice pack there. Put your bottles inside, separate the ice pack from the bottles themselves, and ensure that you choose the quickest method to reach the lab. The samples have a holding time of 48 hours. But given the nature of the country, sometimes some samples come very far away. We do accept these under exceptional conditions, provided they are coming in good cooling conditions. And then send your sample with a chain of custody, which is properly filled. Take some precautions, put it in a Ziploc bag and put it along with the samples in the cooler box. Or you can send an electronic copy of that chain of custody to the lab. Now, it is a good idea to sample as early as in the week. Say by Wednesday, you finish your sampling, because sometimes courier are not that good. They don't deliver the next day. They take 2 days to deliver. So it's not such a good idea to send on Thursday, because if you miss the Friday delivery, then these samples will remain with the courier over the weekend. One more thing about sampling, it is good to use a water-resistant marker to label your samples. Okay, the samples come to the laboratory, but you have to choose which lab you want to use. So select the lab which has got skills in doing Legionella analysis, a lab which is accredited for that service. And normally all these accreditation bodies, whether it is CALA or the Quebec or AIHA accreditation, through these accreditations, you also become ISO 17025 compliant. Look also for a lab which is proficient through a proficiency testing program. The CDC runs the ELITE program along with the Wisconsin State Lab Hygiene. You can also have others, like LGC runs a very good program, the Quality Water Analysis Scheme. And if you are accredited with the Quebec CEAQ, then you also will have the opportunity to do the proficiency through them. Okay, look for a lab which is proactive. What I mean by this is the analysis of culturing normally takes 7 to 10 days, but the labs already know by the 5th or 6th day if counts are very high. So look for those labs which will give you preliminary advance notice of all these high counts of Legionella. Analytical methods now. There are various methods of doing these. The two most common ones which are being used in labs, the culturing method, the gold standard, which has been used for decades, ever since Nemophila has been described as a causal organism for Legionnaires' disease. This is the method which has been used and is still being used most widely around the world. The method which is mostly recognized, the ISO 11731 method. Each country tends to have its own standards, but they are all based on that ISO method. Then we have the molecular methods, these methods which have come in the recent 2 decades being used. qPCR, where you quantify and identify Legionella and Nemophila, or the Legionella genus by the ISO 12869 method, giving you results in 4 hours. It's a very practical tool to use. And then there are other methods, which I'm citing 3 of them. Legionella, which has gained some traction, has been recognized by CDC, is being used in some labs in the States, and also has been accepted by Vancouver as one of the methods to look for Legionella. Diamidex, newly coming on the market, is another tool which has recently gained AOAC certification. And lastly, the state-of-the-art BioAlert, which is a tool which you can hook up to your cooling tower, and it automatically samples the water, runs and give you the results on your cell phone at home. And high counts, you have to run back and control the system as soon as you get an alert. The thing about BioAlert, it looks very nice and a tool to use, but it itself, if you look at the FAQs on BioAlert site, it says that BioAlert is just one of the tools you use to manage Legionella in the system, but should not replace the standard method of culturing. You still have to do the mandatory culturing test every month. Okay, the culture method, the gold standard, most widely used around the world, suitable for all sorts of water, all sources of it, even swab samples. A good thing about culturing that it identifies and quantifies viable living colonies of Legionella and Nemophila, its serogroups, and other species of Legionella. So you get viable counts, the counts of colonies. This is what we want to use. We look at numbers and can judge whether there is a problem or not according to the norms existing in the province or on the country, and you can take action from there. It is a test which is it takes about 7 to 10 days to get results. But as I said earlier on, labs can know as early as the 5th day if there is a big issue, can call you back. Legionella grows in cooling towers. Cooling tower water is quite dirty, comes with a lot of other bacteria. So in the lab, we use a specific agar for culturing Legionella. This is the buffered charcoal yeast extract agar with addition of 4 antibiotics here, making sure that we keep other bacteria out of the culture. And then it's a very nice black background, and you see all these colonies of Legionella growing, appearing dome shape, bluish silvery in color, and it can be easily counted to the naked eye very easily. In contrast, here we have Legionella bosemani, another species of Legionella which fluoresces blue under the UV light. Okay. Okay, so what happens to your sample when it comes to the lab? We normally divide the labs into 3 portions. An untreated portion, as is, and a second portion, which we're going to do a heat treatment at 50 degrees Celsius for 20 minutes, and then another portion in which we're going to mix it up with an acid mixture for 5 minutes. And then after all these treatments, we're going to plate these on the black agar, which is shown you earlier in the previous slide. And in extreme cases where samples can be very dirty in a pulp and paper factory, in the waste coming from there, it's very dirty. So you may even have to have recourse to a combination of heat and acid treatment. All these different ways of doing it, they have advantages and disadvantages. All right, so when we look at your sample from these 3 different treatments, we're going to look at the treatment at the portion which is going to give us the best results. What do I mean here? But the best results is the counts of Legionella free of background flora, free of other bacteria. If it comes from the untreated, we report from there. If it comes from the acid treatment, we will have to report from that treatment. Okay. And here's an example of a sample of 3 samples being analyzed, just to illustrate the point which I've just mentioned earlier on. In the blue highlighted blue section there, we're giving here all the sample details, lab number, sample type, and temperature. And just below that portion, you find the line here talking about procedure details. And if you follow that, you see the first sample was done untreated we got the result, the best result from the untreated portion. The second one, it came from the heat treated portion. And the third one, we did a direct plating from that sample. We could not filter it. We had to take a little bit directly and plate it on the agar, right? So the next line gives you an idea of what is the background flora. And if you follow down there at the background comment, we rate it from not present to being present with 3+ completely covered, and background flora limits the detection of Legionella, right? So in this set of samples, we have 3 samples. These are the groups which we report: Pneumophila serogroup 1, Legionella pneumophila serogroup 2 to 14, total of these, and then other species of Legionella. So if you look at the first sample, this is the ideal situation, the best result that you can get. It's coming from an untreated portion of that sample. We haven't treated it. There is no background at it, and there is no Legionella at all. That's the ideal situation, but things are not as ideal as this in the real world. We do have to use the heat and acid treatment. Second sample illustrates the point here. We've used the heat treatment, and in the presence of, we're reporting in the presence of background, we got 55 Legionella pneumophila serogroup 1. So this 55 number is probably an undercount because both heat and background are preventing us to see the whole situation here, okay? And in the last sample, we did it by direct plating. Obviously here, the detection limit goes high. It goes to 5. Next one. Quantitative PCR. When to use it? At startup, after the disinfection, you want to monitor, or this is where it is a good tool, investigating an outbreak of Legionella disease. You have an outbreak of Legionella in an area, you come around, there are 50 cooling towers, you are going to take 50 samples from these cooling towers, get them to the lab, get your results by the end of the day, and narrow down your search to 3 or 4 or 5, and where you can apply the biocide. And you can also take samples to do culturing to get your results in a few days, right? Or whenever you are running the system on an emergency mode. It's a very fast method, 4 hours. It's efficient to detect and quantify Legionella pneumophila or the genus Legionella itself, right? So it's got a bit of drawback here because it detects both viable and non-viable Legionella DNA, and it has issues with inhibition. Inhibition is mostly caused by residual chemicals following disinfection, following cleaning up, always dirt and debris in the water, which can interfere with the analysis. So that is a problem. We normally get around this by diluting the sample and running the sample at a higher detection limit. How does this work? Normally, we break the cell, process by breaking the cell, lyse the cell, expose the DNA, then target a specific portion of the DNA, which is characteristic of Legionella pneumophila, the target which we are looking at. We look for pneumophila. That's what we call an amplicon. Then we put this amplicon, this target, along with some other ingredients into a tube, put that inside our magic box, this tool here, the thermocycler, and run the machine here for about 1 hour, 40 minutes through 50 cycles, where this is being multiplied and finally quantified, and you get your results on your cell phone, on your computer. You know what's happened. And here's an example of Legionella qPCR results. We have three results here. The first sample, which is a perfect one, a detection not detected, and at a detection limit of 0.8, that's what MD15161 asked us to do. And the second sample, we had a problem of inhibition. We had to dilute. Hence, you see the detection limit goes to 1.6 here. And the last sample, we couldn't process the whole volume of water which we need to get to that bottom of 0.8. We only processed 80 milliliters, and we come down to a 1.2 genome unit per milliliters. Note that some places, they call it genome equivalents per milliliter. Well, that's all from me. Mike?
So I think, Mike, were there any questions in the chat?
There's nothing in the chat right now, but
Nothing in the chat right now. Oh,
we'll keep it open.
keep it open. If anyone has any questions, we'd be happy to answer them. Maybe no one's asking a question. I'll ask Rafiq a question. Rafiq, there's no direct correlation between kind of qPCR results and a corresponding culture result, right? Like you could, in theory, have very high qPCR results.
Yeah, I mean, because it detects the viable and non-viable DNA, right? There is no direct correlation as such. But normally, in a normal situation, if you have some counts, high counts of DNA, you would expect to have some colonies growing on in a normal situation, right? However, when you have very little of DNA, then most likely you won't get any colonies there. It's very rare that this happens because it may be some moribund cells which are around here can still grow, but that's normally the case.
All right, so we just got one question, Adam. With a rental chiller, what is the risk for Legionella growth?
Pierre, do you want to field that one?
Can you repeat the question?
A rental chiller. Like what would you think in terms of risk related to that?
A rental chiller? I mean, like the topic here, a chiller, don't forget it's a closed, like a cooling tower is different. It's an open cell, that's why you evaporate. So between the chiller and the cooling tower, there's a closed loop, like for the water. So a rental chiller, if you want to rent a chiller, I mean, you have to make sure it's well maintained, all the tubes are cleaned and stuff like that because of the biofilm. That's all. I mean, and if the tubes are corroded. But otherwise, there's no problem with rental chillers. But a rental cooling tower, they have to go through extensive. You have to provide document that they are well maintained, and there's no rust, no biofilm on them, everything like being intact, as terms of components of the cooling tower. But rental chiller, I don't think there will be a problem if they are well maintained and cleaned and inspected before using them.
Got a couple more. I'll just keep going, follow in order. Looking for more information on the remediation process. So I assume if there was contamination from Legionella, what would that remediation process look like? And then I've got another question after that one's done.
So I'll start with that one. I think that, it's not necessarily going to be a one size fits all when you get into remediation. If you're talking about, a cooling tower, then, cooling towers are relatively easy to clean because you can shut it down, you can drain it, you can get into it, you can power wash it. Like it's more, it's not more easy. It is easier to clean because you can physically get into it and do that manual cleaning. When you're getting into something like domestic water systems, like it's not like you can take a big pipe cleaner and clean all the copper lines. So, there are a lot of there are some options. There's, sometimes it's a flushing, sometimes it's a heat treatment. We've seen sites run chemicals through like chlorine through the lines. But again, it will depend on your systems, the age of your systems, things like that. Again, it's not one size fits all.
Okay, so got a couple more that came in here. So we got 3 to still address. For qPCR test results, which is less sensitive, a lower sample volume or a more diluted sample? And then we got 2 more after that one.
Well, ideally, we would go with a higher volume of sample. And if you are going to dilute, then it's less sensitive, depending on how much volume you are getting through the system. If you are getting, as in the example here, we were able to do 80 milliliters in the last sample, we could get to a 1.2 genome unit per milliliter. But in the sample 2, where we had to dilute, we got down to 1.6. So obviously, it all depends on the sample. Some sample you have to dilute, others you can only process part of it. Okay.
Can you elaborate on the recirculation of, sorry, I just got domestic hot water if temperature, say, 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and how the aerators are at risk?
So, I mean, the aerators are a risk because like they can produce a small amount of aerosol. So if you've got contaminated water coming through that aerator, there is a small amount of that fine water droplet that can be generated. That's why when you're looking at, a lot of healthcare facilities, they don't have aerators on their faucets to avoid that aerosolization potential from the, when you're in a healthcare setting, you've got an already sensitive population. So I think I answered the question, but if not, let me know.
And then one more, hopefully I read this one out right, but I think this one's going to be for you, Rafiq. Can you speak to CUAG plus, I think the efficiency of it and impact to sample preparation for lab end?
CUG plus.
Copper silver ionization.
Okay. That's more for Adam. Adam, I don't know much about copper silver ionization, but I think you will be better placed for that.
Yeah, so I mean, we've seen copper silver ionization systems work quite well. That like they need to have there needs to be water. There need to be part of a recirculation system. I know of some healthcare facilities that are using them that had issues, and they're functioning quite well. Very effective in terms of it doesn't really impact the analysis, Rafiq, does it? Like you don't need to know. Do you need to know if it's coming from a copper silver ionization system when the samples receive?
No. It's not as cooling towers where we need to know which biocide and how much concentration when you apply. And that also is not everywhere. It's only in Quebec that they have to put this information. The rest of the country doesn't need to put this information.
Yeah, we've seen some good success with those copper silver ionization systems.
So we've got some more questions. Thank you for letting me know about the questions in the Q&A section, not in the chat. So we've got a few more questions in the Q&A. What is the risk for Legionella in commercial hot water tanks? Are there any recommended temperature settings? And then there's two more in this section as well after this one.
We have definitely found Legionella bacteria in domestic hot water tanks and the associated plumbing. The temperature to keep them at, again, it's not going to be a one size fits all thing. It's going to be a function of what can the tank handle. What's the building set up like? If you're keeping the hot water north of 60, that's really minimizing the risk, but you have to think about how your building's set up. Like you can't deliver hot water at 60 degrees Celsius in a lot of facilities for a risk of scalding. There needs to be control of that delivery temperature, whether it's a mixing valve kind of just leaving the hot water tank or at the taps. The hotter the better, because as it gets hotter, the bacteria will die off. But you need to know how your building is kind of structured, that you're not going to burn someone at those points of use.
Usually, from a mechanical point of view, domestic hot water storage is between like around 115 degree, so it's not scalding. And I mean, at night you might set it lower a little bit, but during like the day it's 115. So it's hard because right now, there were so many incidents with over 120 degree to deliver domestic hot water. And what we put right now is three-way mixing valves, to make sure that that temperature is controlled between 110 and below, to 115.
Okay. So we got a few more questions here. Three more that I can count here. Is there a recommended frequency of testing for Legionella? Also, for a typical apartment building, is there an approximate magnitude of cost for the testing?
Well, frequency for cooling tower, I said every month. Potable water systems every 6 months. That's normally the case. And if you have a fountain or a fountain, it's every 3 months. So it's well documented. It's all, systems have to be flushed, potable systems. If they are flushed, normally systems are kept under control, but the testing every 6 months is the norm.
Thank you. Next question. What is the best practice for testing frequency of qPCR during the summer months? So similar kind of question to the last one.
Yeah, this is right. I mean, qPCR is not the tool to go for regular monitoring of a cooling tower, for that matter. Normally, everyone does it by the culturing method, because you work with the live number of colonies. You get these colony numbers, which make sense. But there's some clients do prefer qPCR because of get you the results within the same day, so they act on it. So if you do it once a month for cooling towers, is good.
And then I think this might be the last question. I'll check the Q&A after. Can you pasteurize a hot water tank above 180 degrees Fahrenheit for 1 hour to kill off Legionella?
Again, it will depend on the hot water tank, and it depends on it depends on kind of the how the water tank's set up. Like you can have dead zones in these hot water tanks where, you're going to get some water that, like, you're heating up the majority of the water, but if you've got like a dead zone at the base of the tank, and that superheating doesn't kill everything necessarily. Like I think we see a lot of times that they may be trying that heating and also emptying out the tank. Like the manufacturer has some recommended maintenance activities for any of those tanks. So I don't know that even like it's superheating may or may not work. Again, I can't give you a general statement because every system is going to be a little bit different.
Just had one more question come in. So even if a building doesn't have cooling towers or other exterior water features, it only has sinks, faucets, Legionella testing is still required. I'm guessing at 6-month intervals.
Normally we don't do that in homes, individual homes like this, but in a building, it is recommended to do that. I mean, if you have buildings, you have workers in there, it's quite a big building, you can have the possibility of having dead legs here and there. It might be a good idea to do it every 6 months, right? But in your house, no, I don't think there's any need for doing any testing for Legionella. As long as the system is being used every day, system is flushed completely, there shouldn't be a problem of Legionella.
And again, we talked about those provinces and cities with regulatory requirements. Like it would be best practice. You have to protect the health and safety of everybody. But for like Ontario, for example, it doesn't have a regulation. We would probably see it enforced under that general duty clause.
Yeah.
Just had another one come in. Should dead leg in plumbing obviously be kept as short as possible to prevent Legionella?
You should ideally not have any dead legs, but if you need to if you need to remove a fixture, it should be removed as close to the riser. That branch should be removed back as close to the main riser as possible.
I don't see anything else in the chat.
I think there was one more just above that, Mike. Is it required in commercial office buildings, though, for example, in Vancouver?
My apologies. Thank you, Jose. Missed that.
The testing, I mean, you'd have to look through. I'd have to look through the regulation again. There's definitely a requirement for testing the cooling towers in the city of Vancouver on a monthly basis while they're in operation. I think there's something in there for decorative water features as well. But yeah, you'd need that. It would have to be registered, and once registered, it would get like an operating permit, and then that sampling requirement would be enforced through that bylaw in the city of Vancouver.
Yeah, Vancouver also does the rainwater testing. I think
Right.
That's also mandatory there.
So just a clarification on the question that you were just answering. Sorry, they meant for sinks or faucets in Vancouver.
I'd have to take a second look. I think there's some requirement for like E. coli and total coliform, but I don't know that it has that same requirement for Legionella testing as it does for the cooling towers.
No, I haven't seen in the lab samples for faucets and sinks from Vancouver. The only situation where we do these is that if we're testing and we get samples from the cooling towers for a hotel, then that hotel might be doing some due diligence and taking some samples from different flows. That is the only case where we do that, but I don't think it's mandatory.
Believe that's all the questions.
Excellent.
A lot
Well,
of thank you. So well done, guys.
Excellent. Thanks everybody for attending. And again, you will get a link to this presentation. And yeah, I really appreciate everyone for attending. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone.